What's it like being a female expat living in Asia? How do Western women feel when they see a much older Western gentleman with his much younger local girlfriend? And if my local bra shop only carries a C cup and I'm carrying around a couple of double Fs, how am I going to deal with that? Well, if those questions or anything about being an expat in Asia are of interest to you, it is great to have you with me. My name is Wendy, and for more than 3 decades, I've lived and worked in 5 different countries in Asia, and I still live and work in Asia, now in Thailand. Today, I want to talk about a slightly hidden emotional and financial cost that occurs to expats, particularly around this season, but it can be any time. And I want to start off by saying that this doesn't only apply to female expats. This is expats, either female or male, because we're all just human and this affects all of us. So you might have gathered from the grey hair that I'm not as young as I used to be, and the 30 years in Asia might give that away. So let's talk about what happens as we start to age, and so do our parents. And we have other people that we love, that we miss, that we're not living with. So we have to kind of balance those relationships. And this comes up because, of course, at this time of year, which is heading into the Christmas season, a lot of us start to think about family and home, and we get very sort of sentimental about that kind of thing. And it creates some I don't want to say difficulties, but it creates some discussion around what we do when we're so far from home in these situations. Now, in other videos, I've talked about, do expats celebrate things like Christmas? And of course they do. And one of the reasons that these things become super important is because we need to touch those cultural parts of us that are kind of missing those things. Just because you're an expat, even for part of the year, doesn't mean that you don't love your home country. It just means that you've made a choice to live outside of your home country. So that's something to think about. And like I said, the reason that it's particularly relevant to me at the moment is because this year I have a couple of friends who are determinedly going home for this season because their parents are getting older. And aging parents is a real thing, particularly if you're in my age group, which is the sort of mid to late 50s or getting older, and you've got folks who are still, thankfully with us, but are simply not getting any younger and maybe are starting to get frail. And so what do you do about that? And the thing that isn't talked about much, because sometimes expats get a bit funny about money, is that this is an enormous cost. Financially, this is an enormous cost. It's one of those things that you can kind of factor for, but if you're on, like a regular income, like a retirement pension or something like that, you have to think about the idea that if the worst happens, or at this time of year, you have to factor in airline tickets at the most expensive time of the year. You have to think about hiring a car at the most expensive time of the year. All of the things that people in the West just sort of take for granted around Christmas and New Year, with their budgets, because they're earning in local currency or they're used to paying that much. And all of a sudden you're going to take yourself and maybe a partner and maybe kids onto an airplane and go and live and stay in another place for a week or two. Whoa, that's expensive. That costs a lot of money, and you've got a budget for that. That's not so easy. It's also an emotional cost as well. And that can be that you feel the obligation to do this. You feel that you need to go home. But there's part of you that's kind of dreading it as well. Maybe you're going to see family that you don't particularly want to spend time with. Or even though, you feel that you love these people, but there's a reason why you've decided to live somewhere else. So these are a couple of real factors that expats have to acknowledge, and it is something, it's part of the reality of it. Of course, the other practical point of view is that if you're working like me, I get asked all the time, how many days off do you get for Christmas? Well, you've just seen 2 monks walk past me. I live in a Buddhist country and I don't get any days off for Christmas. I do take them off. I take Christmas and Boxing Day because I love Boxing Day. And those days are part of my annual leave. I take them out of my annual leave. It's not a given that you will get Christmas time off. If you're a teacher, you've got, depending on which sort of system you're in, the British system, the Australian system, a local system, you're not getting time. You'll have to sort of work that out as well. So that's a real factor when you're an expat as well. That kind of, the seasonal thing is quite difficult. But that's just one factor, aging parents. Let's talk about grandkids. Okay, if you're of my age or older or around my age, at some point, if you're lucky enough, you'll get to have grandkids. And grandkids, as we know, they grow like weeds. Why do children do that? So yes, you can talk to them like this, and I know lots of people who, have a daily call with their grandkids, but let's be honest, it's not the same as a hug, is it? It's not the same as a kiss and a cuddle with Nana. So if you are lucky enough to have grandkids and you've made the choice to be an expat, don't just think it's like, oh, that's easy, I'm living overseas. You're in a constant deficit emotionally because you miss those kids, and you know that time is moving on, and that becomes a real balance. It becomes, part of the choices become much, much harder, I think, than people who haven't been in that situation understand. Or perhaps, and this is rare, but I have come across it a number of times, there's a child in the family who is an adult now who has a disability. So you've got a disabled child or a very unwell child, either from a mental health point of view or physically as well, and they're in a good place. You've put them in care because they can't live at home anyway, and for whatever reason you feel that you're okay with moving away from that child, and that child is aging out also, and they're still in the hospital, and so you have to think about how you're going to balance that one. So if there's a disabled adult child, that's also an issue. These are they sound sad, and I don't mean for them to sound sad. I've sounded sad and preachy in my last few videos, but they're just a factor. It's just something that if you're not an expat, then you wouldn't necessarily think about the emotional and financial cost around having people overseas. And for my own personal experience, I will tell you, there was one Christmas I particularly remember where I had 3 kids sort of, in close proximity. So they were, let's say, between 6 and 0. And I needed to get on a plane to go back for Christmas because that was what we had the obligation to do. And it was a pain in the ass. It was an absolute pain in the ass. And when I got there, my then sister-in-law said, well, we won't actually be there for Christmas Day anyway because we're traveling. And I thought, I've just traveled like 6,000 kilometres with 3 kids in an airplane because my then partner, had to work right up until Christmas before he could get on a plane. And you're not even going to be here? What do you mean you're not going to be here? Just stay. The place you're going to is 2 hours drive away. Just stay until after Christmas Day. I've made a huge effort. So that sort of thing, that can be a bit of a strain. So that's my thoughts on that one. It is a tricky thing when you've got people that you love overseas. It doesn't mean we don't miss you. We miss you enormously. If you've got family who are expats and you wonder why it is that they're living that way, we miss you. We do. But we've made this choice, and we have to factor it in for our own lives. And if you're one of the people like me who's made that choice, you just have to kind of work through it. You're not alone. Luckily, wherever you're living, there will be people to support you. Do reach out to other people. But it's just another part of expat life that I think is worth discussing. I'll turn around now so you can see the sunrise here. A lot of people out. Oh, there it is. I hope you're having a lovely day. If there are any questions that you have about what it's like to be an expat, whether a female or male, if you've got any comments below, if any of this stuff chimes with you, please do leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can check out any of the other videos that'll be on the end screen, and I'll leave the I'll leave the link to a couple of other topics that I might have talked about in this video down below. Have a lovely day, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.